Thank you, Honourable Member Asmini.
I can't accept it from him. I gotta bring it. That's a bad baton. It was a pass.
The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Wrong direction, Dad. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I thank God for this opportunity and the residents of Marco City for the opportunity to echo their dreams and aspirations and work towards it in this place, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to begin by extending condolences to just some of the families who we have lost recently, who have lost loved ones recently, and to let them know that we're thinking about them and praying for them during this most difficult period. Madam Speaker, almost every week we have, many of us in this place, apart from our individual constituencies, have in fact been attending national memorials and funerals. In some cases now, 2 national figures in 1 week. But Madam Speaker, all life is equally valuable, and so I want to say to the family of DeWitt Kemp how much you are in our thoughts and prayers, and the families of Olga Feaster, Livingston Woods, Delphine Higgs, Dana Forbes Williams, Alicia Jervis Garland, and to other Marco City family members who are now grieving for Ulrich Nixon. And of course, my niece, her own husband, great Exuma man. We will miss Brother Nixon very much. And of course, Granville Pancho Bain and Suzette Roberts and Melissa Roberts Harvey, Beryl Stewart, and really one of the most powerful matriarchs that all of us, certainly in the Free National Movement, know, Shanina Lockhart Gibson, who we continue to pray for her family and thank them for sacrificing along with so many others time that she would have spent with them, that she really spent doing the work of our party. And also we grieve with the family of Reverend Leonard Pinder, and to say how much we will miss him, and we thank God for his contribution. I had the good fortune of attending Captain Moxie's funeral, and I mean, what an incredible job he has done as an entrepreneur in the Bahamas in raising an incredible family, such gifted children who continue in many different ways to make contributions to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And we want to say to the Moxie family how much we grieve with you, and we thank God for the incredible work of your father, your grandfather, your husband. May their souls rest in peace and rise in glory. Madam Speaker, members of the opposition have clearly indicated that we believe the Longevity and Regenerative Therapies Bill 2024, which is a bill that has repealed the stem cell bill, that it has potential to provide some transformative therapy for a number of Bahamians who are ailing as a result of a number of illnesses. The concerns raised by the opposition, as we caution the government, is for the government to be careful in this end justify the means approach to doing the people's business. We see that strategy being employed in the case of BPL. There's tremendous dysfunction in the grid, in the transmission and distribution lines. We have problems with the generation. We have problems in transferring, whether it's gas from Clifton Pier to Blue Hills. We need a regasification plant. We need to solve the bunkering issues. All of those things are true. But how you execute it is as important as executing it. And so not only is the destination important, but the journey to get there is also important. And that's why we say we support competitive bidding, et cetera. With this particular bill, we support longevity and regenerative therapies in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We believe that there are a number of therapies out there. The unfortunate thing is there are also therapies out there that are potentially dangerous to Bahamians. And of course, the minister, the member for Tall Pines, acknowledged that in his presentation. Other speakers alluded to the potential danger to Bahamians and to even visitors who come to the Bahamas. Therefore, the goal is to put in place at least two things. One, the appropriate policy, and two, the legislation and regulations that flow out of the appropriate policy. The difficulty this administration has is, again, and the chaplain alluded to it, the lack of humility in approaching the preparation of legislation. The arrogance that one can look past the medical practitioners who can play a pivotal role in helping to guide this process, since this process is really not just about medical tourism, which was the major argument of this administration. It is about saving lives and improving the quality of life for so many Bahamians who are afflicted with different debilitating illnesses that require this kind of therapy. This bill, as we understand it, seeks to broaden the category of products and therapies that can help a number of Bahamians and others who come to the Bahamas for treatment in a way that the stem cell bill would not have been able to address, because it narrowly looked at certain categories of diseases and therapies. This bill is designed, as you look at the object and reason, to expand the regulatory environment in order to address some of the new therapies that are out there in the marketplace. Madam Speaker, when the government spoke about the policy being developed, and that is to be developed, it is in fact aspirational, meaning they have not yet gotten there yet, they are still working on it. And that the minister himself said, we are open to ongoing consultation. Obviously, this is an evolving issue. One concern that we have that gives us pause on this piece of legislation is that the government failed to consult some of those persons who were here from ground zero in the development of the stem cell bill of 2012. So when the member for Exuma talked about this particular bill being informed by medical practitioners or professionals, the best-in-class intellectuals on this subject, what he must have been referring to was those persons who participated in the process of the National Stem Cell Task Force of 2012. In December of 2012, one of the drafts, draft 6, was made available. And during that time, a number of professionals, all of whom, at least in the initial iteration of the appointment, were medical doctors, with the exception of Reverend Angela Palacios, who also provided some guidance. But some of those persons would have included Dr. Paul Ward and Dwayne Sands and Robin Roberts and Dr. McCartney and Martin and Francis and Benaby. And of course, Professor Arthur Porter was the chair of that particular body at the time. And they did an incredible job in terms of examining not just the potential health benefit to Bahamians and tourists, but they also talked about, as this administration disproportionately talked about, the medical tourism opportunities. And that is what occupied, if we were to look at the clock and time the contribution of each of the major presenters, the vast majority, at least 3/4 of the discussion, focused on medical tourism. So it's very little, Fort Charlotte, very little time was spent talking about the range of debilitating diseases that afflict Bahamians and the range of therapies that are out there that are not covered by the original iteration of the bill, and that the hope was that this government would actually repeal that bill, put in place the new bill, because the new bill offered opportunities to address those new therapies that were not, in fact, covered. And so Tall Pines, one of the things we would have expected was a discussion about the mischief the bill is designed to solve. And the bill, in fact, did not go down, the communication did not go down that road. And so again, we thought in preparation for this bill that we should ask the medical professionals what their thoughts were and other stakeholders. And to our surprise, we found out that the Bahamas Medical Council was not consulted on this matter. And so the question would be, why would it be important for the Medical Council of the Bahamas to be consulted? And so we were careful to ask the minister, why weren't various key stakeholders involved in the discussion while you were considering repealing the old bill and introducing the new? One would have thought that the persons who participated in 2012, those that are still around, which is the vast majority of them, would have been consulted to see if the new configuration of the legislation and the policy that you said today is not yet fully developed, would they not still have insight that could be valuable to a government that's interested in putting in place the best of class policy, legislation, and regulations to govern this sector and this emerging sector? In 2012, they signaled something that is still and even more relevant today, that there was a need for us to explore stem cell research because of the potential benefits that exist for treating any number of diseases. And yes, there was and is a potential for a jurisdiction like ours to benefit from medical tourism. But they balanced the potential health benefits and benefits financially for medical tourism with the ethical concerns that existed then and exist even more so now. And therefore, what they did is they identified certain types of therapy, stem cell therapy, that they thought were not appropriate in 2012. And so in this legislation, while it does to some extent examine those issues, it certainly did not strike the balance that they highlighted was very important. One of the things they highlighted that was very important in 2012 and remains important now is public education. In fact, they wrote a very large section in the 2012 study on public education and consultation. And so in their recommendation, the #1 issue identified by the task force in 2012 was the need for public consultation and education. They put it this way: the need and scope of public awareness and education. And they talked about how necessary it is so that not only the general public, the international public, but practitioners and stakeholders would all be brought into the discussion. So this administration have sought to summarize its public consultation in the form of one. We've laid it in the House. Anybody who's interested in Vigilant, they should have read it. It's very harsh words for your medical practitioners and the medical council and physicians who will apply whatever therapies that are in place, because the reality is our understanding of the consultation process is that you actually engage them. You engage the key figures in a discussion about what the government envisions in its policy and proposes to do in its laws and regulation, and you fail to do so. The second thing that you've done is you have...
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Central and South Lewisboro.
In regards to the engagement of the professionals and consultation, I remember in April, after we laid the bill, we had invitations, everyone in this place had invitations to something at Atlantis that was called the Healing Future Health Summit, right? And in regarding, so this was a three-day.
I can't remember.
All right.
Maybe 2 or 3.
Listen, I'll give you the agenda.
Give it a day.
So there's a 3-day, right? So on the first day, Madam Speaker, in regards to the summit. You talking about, in regards to the first day, Madam Speaker, they had a pre-opening ceremony, right? And on the second day, at 2:20 p.m., the 2024 Longevity and Regenerative Therapies Bill, New Opportunities for Health, Biotech, and Patients in the Bahamas, in regards to that bill, was spoke to by Honorable Michael Dovell, the member for Tall Pines.
Listen to me.
And nobody from the opposition came.
Nobody had interest.
Nobody had interest. So this was a 3-day symposium in regards to what we're debating today. And you had persons from across the region, from across the globe, scientists, professionals that's interested in being a part of this legislation. And they ain't come. 3-day. 3-day.
That's a serious consultation.
That's a serious consultation. Thank you very much, member for Central and Saudi Lucha. Thank you very much. As I was saying a moment ago, that one was the minister, and of course the member for Exuma, the minister for health from Tall Pines, and more so the member for Exuma, dismissed the medical community for having not participated in any consultation, having not engaged. And
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Tall Pines.
But for Marco City to state what he want to say, but for him to say, we diss the medical community, I think is going a bit too far. Dismiss. How could I dismiss the medical community and I'm the representative for the medical community? I think that's going a bit too far. We are definitely interested in the involvement of our medical community. But always remember now, I cannot force the medical community to come out to these consultations and these events that clearly articulates and explain the legislative framework that we're debating today. This bill was not only, the summit was not only about new incentives or new forms of therapy, it spoke about the bill. And we had legal minds, we had investors, we had doctors to explain the parameters of the bill. When I laid it, and guess what? When we laid it, those who expressed interest in the bill did write us to give comments as it relates to the bill. Fortunately for us, the bulk of the comments were positive.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, honourable member.
As I indicated, that there were 2 opportunities the government had. After you laid the bill, which the case you've made is that you laid the bill and that was pretty much adequate. The second case that you made, the second and final, was that you held a conference. It was not a consultation for the public. You held a conference where you invited persons internationally and locally to talk about this general sector. Those 2 things, so in other words, you did not organize a consultation, no less than the Bahamas Medical Council indicated, that they were not consulted on the bill. And I'm just using a member for Kent Island, I heard you just a moment ago, I'm just using the same template that was successfully used in 2012, I'm just pointing out that you had a formula by the Christie administration that you were able to duplicate in this case, yes, that's an excellent point, the Christie Davis administration. And you had a chance to use the very same formula where medical practitioners listed here were pretty much consulted, and they went out to do a community education program, which I thought you would be good at doing. You went to Parkinson's. We were both there supporting, and we can congratulate them on their work, getting the word out about potential therapies that could benefit our children, benefit our loved ones. The only point I'm making, we have made rather today, is that you have unfortunately not done as robust a job in terms of reaching out to those pivotal stakeholders, which in our view would help you develop an even better policy than the one you're working on, and secondly, improve the legislation that you have here. So one of the things about the legislation you have here is that there is nowhere in this legislation where you have inserted, for example, the Bahamas Medical Council, who have who have the duty of providing oversight for the very physicians that you expect will implement the various therapies to ensure that they are compliant with the regulations you will ultimately put in place. And so one would think that the medical professionals...
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
The Medical Council is an independent body that is responsible for licensing physicians in our jurisdiction. The Longevity and Regenerative Therapies Bill is about bringing therapies, and whatever physician or medical experts who come into the country have to go through that process. I thought it was implied. If it wasn't implied, I'm sorry, but the Medical Council has a specific job, which is to monitor and ensure that those individuals who are practicing medicine in our jurisdiction are safe, they perform in a particular way, and if you really look at the bill, which I would go through later on, but I think I should read it for you in case you didn't read it. Foreign practitioners means a person who currently holds and maintains a license in good standing to engage in the medical profession and or health profession in a jurisdiction other than the Bahamas and who is not the subject of pending disciplinary actions in that jurisdiction. So this is how the Medical Council works. If we have a foreign medical practitioner who wants to come into the country, he has to come through that gateway, not through the longevity bill. He has to come through our association, through our council, and our council is the gateway to keep professionals who are qualified in the jurisdiction. I don't need to explain that in this bill. That is self-implied.
As I said before, and again, we are here to echo the concerns of those stakeholders who feel that they are not represented by some of the considerations of policymakers. And the Bahamas Medical Council is but one of them. Secondly, in the course of us preparing for the debate, I was just finishing the... Yeah.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
Say that. These councils are independent councils, and for them to pretty much say that they're not a part of the regulatory framework of this bill is completely incorrect. I want to reiterate it again. The Medical Council is responsible, and it is the gatekeeper to ensure that medical practitioners in our country go through a rigorous process to be able to practice in the country. Not the Longevity and Regenerative Bill. This is completely different. So when you mention the Medical Council is informed about individuals who want to come into the country. And by the way, under the stem cell legislation, which is in existence now, that has been in existence from 2013, the regulatory framework is already in the country, by the way. This is not reinventing the wheel. This is tightening the regulatory framework to ensure that as the industry grows, we grow with it. That's all this legislation is doing. I'm not reinventing the wheel. This exists.
Thank you, honorable member.
I'd just like to then ask a question and just to hear your response. Do you believe it would have been advisable to have had a discussion very specifically utilizing this bill as the document for discussion with the Medical Council?
Me and you, member for Marco City, the Medical Council was informed about our health summit. Members of the Medical Council were present, many were present, and they are quite familiar with what we are doing with this bill. Many medical practitioners are currently involved in stem cell industry throughout the country, and they are so because they're interested in the field. Not every medical practitioner is interested in regenerative medicine, and that's their choice. But there are some in the country who express keen interest in this, and they follow this closely with a magnifying glass, and they have contributed with the discussions of the bill, and we have incorporated many of their recommendations in the bill that we have now in front of us.
Again, I would leave that point only by saying that the medical council was not consulted by this administration on a bill where the minister has said they are the gatekeepers of a bill such as this. The second thing is, we have had, secondly, I think all of us in here have the utmost respect for Dal Regis. I'm just wondering whether or not the minister or his team, have there been any discussions with somebody of that caliber who has institutional memory such that she's familiar, for example, with the history of the stem cell discussions in the Bahamas, no doubt familiar through the literature review of what has been happening in terms of best practices in other jurisdictions, and has, apart from institutional memory, experience. Much like, again, the list of doctors I referred to earlier. Having reached out on that list, I know that some of those persons who participated in the original consultation before this iteration of the bill, which again, to remind the public, expanded the range of additional therapies that could be used, meaning the stem cell covered a group of therapies. Now you have an expanded range of treatment, which requires, one, further education of the public, and two, we then need to, again, balance interest in medical tourism, balance interest in helping those who are afflicted. We need to balance that with potential risk that can emerge with new therapies. Let me give one example. One of the things I know, I think you may have touched on, but I want to just bring it home for the public. We're in the age of AI, where you are able, a member for Kent Island, to take all the big data that's out there as you look to attack some of the diseases that presently exist. And then you can actually instruct. You can use AI to try and come up with solutions if you're a good guy, or something else. Those things that can be used, whether it's biowarfare, if you're a bad guy. So obviously AI has now sped up the potential for good solutions, which we would welcome, or for bad outcomes, depending on who's involved. So once again, by expanding the range of potential therapies, we have not only increased our potential to do well in medical tourism, but more importantly, to help our loved ones who are afflicted. We're now in an environment where the risks are also exponentially increased. Hence, it then makes it even more important for us to talk with the Dal Regis, with the medical council, with stakeholders who were previously involved and stakeholders whose views are relevant today. For example, the Bahamas Christian Council is but one of those stakeholders you consulted last time. This time, they were not consulted. So I'm just going down the list of who you consulted before and pointing out that those gatekeepers, unfortunately, you have not spoken to them in the manner you spoke to them previously. And all I'm saying is that is a mistake in doing that. And that's why it's suggested that even if you took, as we did the other day, an hour, go ahead and consult with them this week. Let's talk. Let's park the bill in committee. This week, let's pass it. Even if it's on Wednesday, we can allocate that 1 hour, that time, with you having gone and spoken to them if necessary, and we pass it this week. So we have to get out of this week. We can do that. But all I'm saying is the key stakeholders you went to last time, for whatever reason, you did not go to them this time. Your conference does not count as a consultation. The conference objectives were different. People were not there in the same context as with a consultation. And I believe Tall Pines, that your consultation works in this way. So if you pick the conference that you just mentioned, the way it normally works, I understand, when you're dealing with continuing education for for medical practitioners is you actually hold an event. The event is minuted, whether that's a direct meeting with those who you're consulting with, or if you go to a conference, it's minuted. Persons then give feedback on the different elements of your bill or your agenda, if it is a closed-door meeting, for example. And then, if it meets the criteria as you have it set up in your profession, they then get the continuing education credits. Your conference did not qualify as continuing education credits for medical practitioners. So the consultation in the classic way that you have carried out your consultation, the conference does not qualify. It was a different type of conference to accomplish a different set of objectives. Nor did you have minuted meetings with any of the stakeholders in the way you would have done, for example, with the cannabis bill. Right? And to some extent, there was some consultation. I know under the previous Prime Minister, we had extensive consultation. Those were minuted meetings. And the views then inform the choices on what we did with respect to the consortium of cannabis bill. And I presume you would have done something similar. In fact, if I'm not incorrect, you mentioned the medical the Bahamas Medical Council in that particular bill. The only thing is you mention them in the wrong context, because if you look at where you have them placed in the cannabis bill, it is not the role that they ought to be playing in terms of that. So I'm just making the point that in your next bill, which you will also be a principal speaker on, Tall Pines, you recognize the role of the medical council, Bahamas Medical Council, but except it's not their job to police doctors and other dispensers of the cannabis treatment. And in that bill, you have them as policing. But you at least appreciated institutionally as a statutory body, they have a role to play. In this case, they were excluded. And all we're saying is that is a substantial omission, but they are not alone. The other stakeholders, those with institutional memory, the Dal Regis, those that served in the first iteration of the bill, they are also missing in your consultation, which begs the question, who did you consult with? And again, what's driving it? 75% of your discussion was about, when I shouldn't say your, because it's not just you, your colleagues, as they discussed this, it was about medical tourism. And we, like you, want to grow this economy by more than 2%, because presently you're on a 1.1, 1.7 trajectory in terms of growing the economy. That's woefully bad. And so we want to grow the economy. So any opportunities to have expanded opportunities for Bahamians, we support, and we will support the government in that regard. However, the principal reason for this kind of bill should be to expand options for treatment for the people we love and we care about. And that's why we're here. And so certainly this bill contemplates that, and that is precisely why we said we see some opportunities here. But there is a disproportionate focus on the revenue generating potential, but you do not balance that off by looking at the unintended risk that can come from this. And one of the ways you fail to account for the risk is consulting the best we have in the country, who should be the primary gatekeepers. Foreign interest or participation on the board is not a bad thing. However, it is secondary to having the Bahamian intelligentsia in the medical field to dominate the boards at the nomination level, at the committee, at the actual board itself, and of course the subcommittees of that board, including the ethics committee, which also I hope in your wrap-up, Member for Tall Pines, I hope that you will address whether or not the existing ethics committee was in fact engaged. I believe in our present structure, they report to the minister. And so it would also be useful to hear what their comments were in terms of all of the emerging therapies and whether or not they had particular concerns. In your last report in 2012, there were several areas that were mentioned. I mean, one of them that the red flag was raised on the use of embryonic stem cell in the Bahamas. Of course, the committee at that time had a recommendation. That recommendation was that we ought to avoid certain therapies within that particular category. And then the second was the use of talking about the use of reproductive human cloning. That was another recommendation. It would be useful for the public to have heard, but it's not too late, since you're wrapping up. It'll be useful for you to mention the areas where the Ethics Committee cautioned, where we should not permit certain things happening in the Bahamas, just for the sake of balance. I believe that this area of science is potentially transformative. But what I believe as policymakers, we have to give the balanced view in terms of the pros and cons of what is being contemplated in this bill, and then we ought to cite those persons who participated in the process. And I was just surprised that you didn't get around to mentioning some of the gatekeepers, both in terms of the institutions themselves as well as individuals who would have guided this process. In other words, one of the areas that was missed in this discussion is which best-of-class legislation informed our choice of this particular legislation that you have brought today that repealed the stem cell legislation. That was missing in this discussion, and it is my hope in your wrap-up you would address what legislation informed your choices. And so again, I suggest that you have that consultation. We'd be more than happy in a fulsome way to support it. Outside of, I think, an undertaking, we would have to abstain on what you have presented here. And so I just want to say another thing that may have been helpful that you could address inside your wrap-up is you talked about the 1,000 therapies that was in fact carried out. You didn't indicate what period. For example, was it in the period leading up to when we had to basically shut down operation of one of the earliest practitioners in this field because of concerns raised in the report mentioned earlier by the member for St. Anne's, or was it subsequent to that? What particular areas were those therapies carried out? Because you have a chance in your wrap-up to say to family members that beyond Hunter's disease or some of the cancer treatment, what are some of the other areas that can potentially benefit from this technology? I thought that you missed an opportunity there to address those various areas. And so again, we recommend to this government that you speak to those persons who are an integral part of this community, who are on the front line of exploding opportunities for improving the quality of life for citizens and saving lives, that you speak to members of civil society in a very direct way, minuted meetings, asking their feedback on this particular range of therapies that have not yet been introduced in the Bahamas, but that you are now opening the floodgate for them coming in. And so having raised those issues, Madam Speaker, I'd like to say thanks for this opportunity to put our concerns on the record. And I'd also like to say to my colleagues for a job well done in addressing this issue. And I want to say Central and Saudi Lutra, we share your view that it is important for us to introduce legislation that improves the quality of life and can save the lives of our citizens. So when we raise concerns or point out omissions, it is not because we have a different objective, nor is it because we are on a different political path. It's because we believe for a more fulsome and comprehensive solution, we have to involve more of the Bahamian genius that's onshore and offshore in providing solutions.
Honourable Member Asmini.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for
Madam
tall
Speaker, as I
pines.
stand for our wrap-up, yes. Lundy? Lundy want to speak? I'll sit down, Lundy.